Hello everyone, straight from Brazil to the world, you are on the Boosted Man channel. Leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any videos.
Few phrases have the power to completely uncenter a man like this one. We need some space. It doesn't come with drama or tears. It's said calmly, and yet it carries the weight of rupture. Time seems to stop, silence becomes heavy, and the body reacts as if something vital had been taken away. But the space she asks for is rarely physical. It is emotional, and more deeply, symbolic. It's a silent test of your inner presence, of your relationship with your own power. The woman, consciously or not, observes what happens when she pulls away. She wants to feel whether the man remains whole, or if he collapses. Because in the feminine unconscious, distance is a mirror, not a punishment. Most men react by trying to win her back, sending messages, offering explanations, begging for clarity. But that only reveals the opposite of what she's seeking. A man whose identity depends on her validation. Space is the laboratory where a man's level of consciousness is revealed. It shows whether he reacts with desperation or with presence. Carl Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And space is exactly that darkness, the territory where you confront what you've always avoided. Need disguised as love, fear dressed as desire, control masked as care. When she asks for space, what she's really saying is, "I want to see who you are when I'm not around." It's not about distance, it's about reflection. It's not rejection, it's invitation. An invitation to stop being the man who reacts to her behavior and become the man who inspires her behavior. Because true masculine power doesn't come from controlling the bond. It comes from remaining grounded even when the bond breaks. The void that reveals who you are. When she says she needs space, everything familiar dissolves. Messages stop, plans fade, silence takes over. And what a man feels, he often confuses with longing, is something deeper. The absence of himself. The man who anchors too much of his identity in a woman loses his emotional boundaries. He starts measuring his worth through her reactions. When contact stops, his entire system collapses. Long texts, rushed promises, desperate explanations, all born from the same place, the fear of disappearing. But for her, distance is an invisible experiment. She doesn't watch what you say. She watches how you handle the silence. Every gesture becomes a revelation. Desperation exposes fragility. Trying to prove something shows insecurity. But the man who stays centered, calm, unhurried, grounded, radiates something rare, emotional autonomy. That's the moment the energy shifts. Space stops being absence and becomes symbolic presence. A silent force the feminine unconscious recognizes and respects. A woman can feel when a man's energy remains present even with no contact. It's the vibrational field of the mature masculine, one who doesn't need to be seen to exist. When a man collapses, she feels pity. When he tries to prove himself, she feels pressure. But when he remains whole, she feels magnetism. The distance then fulfills its purpose, to show her, and him, where the love truly came from. Was it presence or dependency? And that's when the void becomes revelation. Because the void is not the end of the relationship, it's the end of the illusion. It's where the man awakens to the realization that he doesn't need to be chosen to have value. She doesn't want to see the man who chases her. She wants to see the man who stays rooted in himself. The silence she creates is a mirror, and the question it reflects is brutal. Who are you when she's not watching? Masculine silence as a test of value. After distance, the natural impulse is to act, to send a message, ask questions, look for answers. But it's in this very interval that she observes how much your world depends on her to keep spinning. The feminine instinct senses desperation disguised as affection. When a man says, "I just want to understand what happened," she doesn't hear concern. She feels emotional dependence. And nothing pushes a woman away more than a man who's lost his center. True power lies in conscious silence, not born from pride, but from serenity. The silence of a grounded man is not the absence of reaction. It's a higher form of reaction. It's the language of self-control and self-sufficiency. While the ordinary man seeks answers, the mature man offers stability. And in that contrast, the feminine energy begins to reorganize itself. In her unconscious, the man who withdraws without resentment embodies strength. He activates the archetype of the guardian, the one who witnesses chaos without being swallowed by it. That kind of presence is rare, and what is rare in the realm of attraction becomes irresistible. Silence, when genuine, is not a game. The silence of fear is tense. Born from ego, it tries to manipulate the outcome. The silence of awareness is calm, born from clarity and therefore magnetic. A woman can feel the difference. She feels when silence is a shield, and when it's an affirmation. And that's when desire reawakens. Because the feminine unconscious is drawn to the masculine that contains its own fire, not the one that spreads it. The man who masters silence becomes an enigma, not through strategy, but through energy. His presence no longer depends on her response. He doesn't seek validation, he is validation. And that shift creates the magnetic field that reignites her interest. She starts to wonder, why didn't he react? What is he feeling? Does he still want me? That's how silence turns from absence into presence, from weakness into power, from loss into rebirth. Silence exposes the difference between the man who begs and the man who inspires, between the one who seeks acceptance and the one who already accepts himself. When that vibration manifests, the game changes, without him having to move a single piece. She may have asked for space, but it's his silence, not his words, that fills that space in the most irresistible way. Space as a ritual of rebirth. There comes a moment when silence stops being pain and becomes initiation. The void no longer feels like punishment. It becomes sacred ground, a field of reconstruction. The immature man tries to fill the space with action. He writes, insists, promises. He believes love is sustained by insistence. But the conscious man learns that real love only survives through silence. Space becomes the temple of emotional purification, where attachment dies and the center is reborn. When you stop reacting, you start existing. Her absence forces you to look within, and there, you discover how much of your love was really the need to be chosen. When that need dissolves, authentic presence emerges. Absence ceases to be a void to fill and becomes a field to radiate from. You don't need to chase or disappear to appear strong. You become the gravitational center of your own world. And when you find that axis again, something shifts in her too. She begins to miss the version of herself that existed near that balanced man. Because the feminine, by nature, seeks the masculine axis, drawn to the stability that makes her feel both safe and intrigued. The man who understands the value of space does not fear it. He honors it. He knows that distance is the ritual that sharpens consciousness. Each uncontrolled emotion turns into clarity. Each impulse transforms into understanding. That's when he stops being the one who reacts and then becomes the one who emanates. She distances herself to test him. He uses that distance to fortify himself. She seeks space to find herself. He uses it to redefine himself. That is the line separating the ordinary man from the awakened man. The ordinary one fights against the void. The awakened one walks through it and emerges on the other side calm, magnetic, whole. True power isn't about making her come back. It's about returning to yourself. When that happens, a man no longer needs to beg for presence. He becomes presence. Space then reveals its spiritual meaning. It is not distance, it is ritual. The interval where the man who loved out of need transforms into the man who loves from awareness. And in that silent rebirth, he becomes irresistible. Not because she came back, but because he came back to his own center. At first it all seems like a power game, but over time it becomes clear. Her request for space was not rejection, it was a calling. An unconscious invitation to abandon the man who loved out of fear and awaken the man who loves out of presence. Her absence wasn't the end, it was a mirror. It forced you to see how much of your worth depended on someone else's response. And that pain marks the beginning of emotional maturity. The conditioned man needs to be noticed. The awakened man is notable simply by being at peace. He doesn't seek love, he becomes love. And when that energy stabilizes within him, the universe responds. The space she created was the portal of your reconstruction. Her silence, the invisible teacher. And if you have the courage to stay in that silence without running away, you'll see what was always there. She never left you. She simply returned you to yourself. Jung said, "The longest journey is the journey inward." And it is that journey that transforms the man who fears silence into the man who dwells in it. The man who begs into a source of magnetism. The man who once reacted into a center of gravity. When she senses that change, she will recognize, not with her mind but with her body, that something essential has transformed. Because the feminine can feel the field of an integrated masculine. He doesn't speak, he vibrates. And that vibration rekindles authentic desire. So when she says, "We need space," understand, it's not the end. It's the beginning of your power, the symbolic call to walk through darkness and rediscover the light of your own awareness. Silence doesn't end the conversation. It marks the beginning of masculine sovereignty, the transition from the man who seeks to be loved to the man who becomes love. Because the space a woman asks for is not distance. It's the mirror that invites a man to cross the void of dependency and rediscover the silent power of presence.